Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're strapping in for a thought experiment with huge implications.
Yeah.
What might the first 100 days of a second Trump presidency actually look like?
Yeah.
And don't worry, this isn't about opinions or predictions.
Right.
We dug into some serious analysis,
Right.
historical context, and even glimpses into Trump's own plans to present you the most informed view possible.
It's like political strategists have been playing a game of 4D chess, mapping out potential moves and counter moves. There are detailed blueprints out there, not just from Trump's inner circle, but think tanks across the political spectrum. It really highlights how much anticipation there is surrounding a potential second term.
So it's not just about day one headlines.
Right.
This is about understanding the strategy behind the actions.
Right.
And from what we've uncovered, it seems like the first 100 days could be dominated by three major areas: the economy, immigration, and maybe even a shakeup of how the government itself functions.
That's right. These are areas where Trump has consistently signaled his intent to make sweeping changes, using both executive power and by pushing his agenda through Congress.
Okay, let's dive into the first area. The economy. We all remember drill, baby, drill from the 2016 campaign.
Yeah.
But it looks like Trump might take that energy policy to a whole new level this time around. Some analysts are suggesting he could bypass certain environmental reviews to fast-track pipeline projects, which could ignite some serious pushback from environmental groups. What's your take on that?
Well, it's no secret that Trump has been a vocal advocate for expanding domestic energy production, speeding up approvals for drilling and pipelines. We'd certainly align with that goal. But the potential for legal challenges from environmental groups is a real concern. It could lead to delays, court battles, and ultimately a less predictable outcome for his energy agenda.
That makes sense. So it's not as simple as just signing an executive order and watching the oil flow.
Right.
There are real complexities and potential roadblocks at play.
Exactly. And we have to consider the ripple effects. Trump's focus on traditional energy sources might come at the expense of investment in renewable energy, which could have long-term implications for climate change and the U.S.'s role in global energy markets.
And what about the impact on everyday people? This is just about abstract policy debates. Some analysts argue that Trump's energy plan could lead to lower gas prices and create a boon in certain sectors. But wouldn't that likely come at the cost of environmental regulations and potentially have negative impacts down the line? Tough trade-off to consider.
Absolutely. And it's important to look at the potential economic impacts beyond just gas prices. Will there be a significant increase in jobs, or are these projections overly optimistic? What about the potential impact on manufacturing and other industries that rely on global trade? There are a lot of moving pieces to consider.
Okay, so there's a lot more to the economic picture that meets the eye. It'll be fascinating to see how these potential actions play out in the real world. But let's shift gears to another potentially explosive issue.
Immigration.
And what's more, Trump has floated some pretty dramatic ideas, like invoking a law from 1798, the Alien Enemies Act, to enact mass deportations.
Wow.
That sounds like something out of a history book. Can he actually do that?
Well, the Alien Enemies Act was passed during a time of war with France and has rarely been used since then. It's incredibly controversial because it grants the president broad powers to detain and deport non-citizens deemed a threat. Whether it could be applied in this context is highly debatable, and legal challenges would be almost guaranteed.
So even if Trump tries to dust off this old law, it's likely to get bogged down in the courts. But let's say, hypothetically, that he manages to overcome the legal hurdles. What kind of practical implications are we talking about here?
Even setting aside the legal and ethical questions, the logistics of mass deportations on the scale Trump has suggested would be incredibly challenging. Experts estimate it would cost billions of dollars, strain government resources, and potentially disrupt industries that rely on immigrant labor.
So not exactly a smooth or efficient process. And let's not forget the human cost. This is about real people's lives being upended.
Exactly. It's important to remember that any policy, especially one as sweeping as this, has human consequences.
Okay, so we've got potentially volatile energy plans and controversial immigration proposals. What else could be in store for those first 100 days?
Well, one of the most intriguing aspects of a potential second Trump term is his apparent desire to reshape the federal government itself.
Yeah, I've heard rumblings about that. Something about an executive order called Schedule F.
Right. Schedule F would essentially reclassify many federal employees, making it easier to fire them and replace them with people seen as more loyal to Trump's agenda. The idea is to eliminate what some call the deep state, career bureaucrats, who they believe are resistant to change.
So it's about consolidating power and control within the executive branch.
In a way, yes, but this is where things get especially complicated. The federal workforce plays a critical role in implementing policy and ensuring the government functions effectively. Critics argue that Schedule F could undermine expertise, politicize the civil service, and make it harder to hold the government accountable.
It sounds like this could set up a major power struggle between the president and the federal bureaucracy, and potentially even spark legal challenges from groups concerned about civil liberties and due process.
Absolutely. And it wouldn't just be about internal government dynamics. Think about the potential impact on agencies like the EPA, the CDC, or the FDA. These agencies are responsible for things like environmental protection, public health, and food safety. A major shakeup could have a ripple effect across society.
Whoa. That puts things into perspective. It's not just about political maneuvering in Washington. It's about the potential impact on all of us.
Exactly.
The first 100 days of a second Trump term could be a period of profound change with potentially far-reaching consequences. Okay, so we've got a lot to unpack here. We've covered potential shakeups in energy policy, immigration, and even the structure of the federal government itself. We're just getting started.
That's right. We still need to delve into Trump's potential cabinet picks, his approach to foreign policy, and the overall impact on American democracy.
Sounds like we're in for a wild ride. Let's take a quick break and then dive back into this fascinating and potentially turbulent political landscape.
Now, if we shift our focus from domestic issues to the global stage, a second Trump presidency would undoubtedly send shockwaves across the world.
It's interesting how America First became such a defining slogan of his first term. It often gave the impression that the U.S. was going it alone on the world stage. But in reality, his actions had a ripple effect, sometimes creating tension, but also forging some unexpected partnerships.
That's a sharp observation. His approach to foreign policy was anything but predictable, keeping allies and adversaries alike on their toes. Just think back to that unexpected summit with Kim Jong-un. Nobody could have predicted that.
It certainly made headlines. But looking ahead, what might these ripples look like in a second term? Let's start with those key alliances, particularly NATO. Some analysts are suggesting we could see a more transactionist approach with pressure on European members to increase their financial contributions. Is a NATO shakeup on the horizon?
Well, Trump has been vocal about his belief that many NATO members aren't shouldering their fair share of the financial burden. It's possible he could push for significant changes in funding or even threaten to reduce the U.S. commitment. If his demands aren't met, this could have major implications for European security, especially considering the ongoing conflict in Ukraine.
And speaking of Ukraine, that's a huge unknown in all of this. Trump's past praise for Putin has raised concerns about how a second term might affect U.S. support for Ukraine. Could we see a major policy shift, potentially even a scaling back of military aid?
That's a critical question. Some analysts fear that a reduction in U.S. support could embolden Putin and have a significant impact on the balance of power in the region. It's a situation with potentially global consequences, and one that will be closely watched by world leaders.
Okay, so we've got potential tension with NATO and uncertainty surrounding Ukraine. What about other key players on the global stage, like China and Iran? Trump's first term was marked by trade wars and tariffs with China. Could we see a resurgence of those economic battles?
It's certainly a possibility. Trump has consistently viewed China as a strategic competitor, and he hasn't been shy about using aggressive economic tactics to counter their influence. A second term could bring a new wave of tariffs, sanctions, or other measures aimed at pressuring China.
Now, what would that mean for the global economy, which is already facing so much uncertainty?
Well, escalating tensions with China could disrupt global supply chains and create further instability in the markets. It would be a risky move with potentially far-reaching economic consequences. And then there's Iran. The decision to pull out of the Iran nuclear deal during his first term led to heightened tensions in the region. Could we see a return to that kind of brinkmanship?
It's a valid concern. Trump has been a vocal critic of the Iran nuclear deal and has advocated for a more hawkish stance towards Iran. A second term could see a return to the maximum pressure campaign, potentially increasing the risk of conflict in the Middle East.
It's a complex and volatile situation with no easy answers. And then, of course, there's Trump's unpredictable nature, his tendency to make sudden policy shifts and overturn previous agreements.
It's like he's always playing 3D chess while everyone else is stuck in checkers.
That unpredictability makes it incredibly difficult to forecast exactly what a second Trump presidency would mean for foreign policy. But one thing's for sure, it would be a turbulent ride with global implications.
Okay, so we've covered potential economic shakeups, immigration controversies, a potential restructuring of the federal government, and now a highly unpredictable approach to foreign policy. It feels like we're hurtling towards a political singularity.
It's certainly a lot to process.
Right.
And there's one more crucial aspect of a potential second term that we need to examine: the impact on American democracy itself.
That's the elephant in the room, isn't it?
Yeah.
Trump's first term was marked by actions that challenged democratic norms and institutions, from questioning the legitimacy of elections to undermining the free press.
Exactly. And there are concerns that a second term could see even more aggressive moves to consolidate power and erode democratic safeguards.
So let's paint a picture here. What are some of the specific actions that experts are worried about?
One major concern is the potential for Trump to pardon himself or his allies for any past or future crimes that would further undermine the rule of law and set a dangerous precedent.
And what about the ongoing investigations into his business dealing and potential election interference? Could he try to shut those down?
He's already hinted at the possibility of firing special counsel Jack Smith, who is overseeing those investigations. Such a move would send a chilling message about his disregard for accountability and independent oversight.
There would be a bold, and some would say, reckless move.
Absolutely. And there's also the potential for him to use executive orders to circumvent Congress and implement his agenda unilaterally. This could further erode the balance of power between the branches of government and create a more authoritarian system.
So we're talking about a potential power grab, potentially even a shift away from democratic principles.
It's a slippery slope, to be sure, and it's why so many people are deeply concerned about the future of American democracy. Under a second Trump presidency.
There's a lot to take in. And to be honest, it's a bit unsettling after exploring all these potential challenges and uncertainties. Is there any room for optimism? Are there any factors that might constrain Trump's actions or push back against his more extreme impulses? It is a heavy question to grapple with. After all those potential storms we just talked about, I think we could all use a dose of optimism.
Absolutely. It's easy to get caught up in the potential risks and challenges. But there are also reasons to believe that a second Trump term wouldn't necessarily be a straight path to democratic erosion.
Okay, I'm all ears. Tell me about those glimmers of hope.
Well, first and foremost, we can't forget about the power of the people. Trump's first victory might have exposed deep divisions in American society, but it also ignited a surge in activism and civic engagement. We're seeing a renewed focus on voter registration, campaign donations to opposing candidates, and grassroots organizing. It's clear that many people are determined to protect democratic norms and hold those in power accountable.
So you're saying that increased civic engagement could act as a counterbalance?
Exactly, to some of these potential threats. And this energy is taking many forms. We're seeing more protests and demonstrations, legal challenges to controversial policies, and watchdog groups meticulously scrutinizing every move the administration makes.
It sounds like a more vigilant and informed citizenry could play a crucial role.
Absolutely, in keeping things in check. And it's not just individual citizens who are stepping up. The media, despite often being a target of Trump's criticism, is also playing a vital role.
All right, we're seeing some truly impressive investigative journalism. They're fact-checking claims, digging into potential conflicts of interest, and bringing any abuses of power to light.
Precisely. A free and independent press is essential for a healthy democracy, and it will be more important than ever in the coming years. And let's not forget the courts. Even though Trump has appointed numerous conservative judges, the judicial system remains a crucial safeguard against executive overreach.
So despite the concerns about potential power grabs, the system of checks and balances is still functioning?
Yes, to a significant extent. The courts have a long history of pushing back against presidential overreach, and that's unlikely to change. And there's another potential check on Trump's power that's often overlooked: dissent within his own party.
Well, that's right. We saw glimpses of that during his first term, with some Republicans breaking ranks on certain issues.
Exactly. And with the political landscape as polarized as it is now, those intra-party divisions could become even more pronounced. Some Republicans, particularly those in swing districts, might be hesitant to support Trump's more extreme policies. if they fear alienating moderate voters.
So potential pushback from within his own party could limit his ability.
That's certainly a possibility to enact his full agenda. And then there's the global community to consider. While some foreign leaders might welcome Trump's return, others are deeply apprehensive about his impact on global stability. We're already seeing pushback from European allies on issues like trade and defense spending.
That makes sense. International pressure could act as a significant constraint.
Precisely, on Trump's actions, especially if his policies lead to economic or diplomatic consequences. And finally, let's not underestimate the enduring power of the American spirit, the belief in democracy, fairness, and the rule of law. These ideals have faced challenges before, but they've always proven to be resilient.
I see what you're saying. The very values that some see as threatened by a second Trump term could be the driving force.
Exactly. That ultimately leads to a course correction. The pendulum of history swings back and forth, even in moments of uncertainty and potential turmoil. There are always seeds of hope, sparks of resistance, and forces pushing for a better future.
That's actually a really reassuring way to wrap up this deep dive. It's been a journey exploring potential pitfalls, but also glimmers of hope. What have we learned from all this?
I think the biggest takeaway is that the future is not predetermined. The next 4 years will undoubtedly be a pivotal chapter in American history, but the outcome will depend on a complex interplay of factors, including the actions of political leaders, the engagement of citizens, the role of the media, and the strength of democratic institutions.
And it sounds like we all have a part to play.
Absolutely. In shaping that future is more important than ever to stay informed and engage in thoughtful discussion and hold those in power accountable.
Well said. And this has been a truly enlightening conversation. Thanks for diving deep with us today.
It's been a pleasure. And to everyone listening out there, stay curious, stay engaged, and keep asking those tough questions.
Yeah.